Jennifer Lee, introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Lee, and I'm running for state representative for House District 55, which is located in Bell County in Temple, Belton, Nolanville, Harker Heights, and a little portion of Killeen, thanks to gerrymandering.
Yeah, somebody told me about that earlier about that because weren't y'all once part of, was it La Pas's too?
That was House District 54, which encircles House District 55. So we're called the donut and the donut hole, and I'm the donut hole.
Okay. What inspired you to run for office and why now?
So I decided to run for office this time around, not because it was something I had been planning on doing this cycle. I was actually asked in December by one of our elected officials if I would be interested in running for the position. And I hadn't been thinking about it because, being busy as a teacher and a single parent, it was not on my radar this time around. And I knew I want to run for this seat in a few years when my son's a little bit older. He's 8 right now, and that's not the most conducive to being able to be busy running for office. But I decided to run this time around because I saw the MAGA extremism and the poor legislation that was continuously coming down the pipeline, and saw, our of Representatives, the few that were for public education fighting as hard as they could to defeat the voucher program or voucher scam. And I just decided, you know what, they need some help. And a lot of damage can be done legislatively in 2 years if we don't have the right people elected. And some of it possibly, we can't come back from it. And so I said, you know what, I guess I'd been frustrated, feeling like I needed to do something. I needed something to change in my life. I just needed a challenge of some sort. And so I said, if you want something different, you have to do something different. And this is different. And so just going ahead and accepting the challenge and deciding, you know what, this is the time. It's time to go ahead and just do the thing.
All right. Well, what specific experience or qualification do you bring to make that makes you the right candidate for this role?
So my degree is in child and family studies. And so I've studied, how children grow and develop from the womb all the way basically to the tomb. And I've studied every stage of development and really spent time learning about how human relationships are formed, but also how children learn, how children grow. And I've also got a master's degree in in administration. I have 4 teaching certifications, one in general education, early childhood through, I believe it's 6th grade, special education, early childhood through 12th grade, a principal certification, early childhood through 12th grade, and a family and consumer science certification, 6th grade through 12. So, in some shape, form, or fashion, I am certified to teach any grade level, K through 12, but also conduct administrative tasks for them. So, with that being said, looking at 2 of the top priorities this election cycle, education and women's reproductive rights, I always say, imagine having somebody in the house who actually understands how children grow and develop and who has actually taught children in a public school classroom. And imagine having someone who actually understands women's reproductive systems and health, not just because I'm a woman, but because I've actually studied it and I've taught how children grow. And I've taught, when we talk about conception, what that looks like, when we talk about heartbeat versus cardiac material that's just, providing electrical pulses, talking about how children are actually formed and developed in the womb. Imagine having somebody who actually understands that. And I remember I was told about, someone asked a lawmaker, well, here's a question about, women's reproductive systems, just to see whether or not they even have an understanding of what that even is like. And, they said, can you pee with a tampon in? And he was like, no, of course not. That's not, women can't, yeah, you can't do that. That is absolutely ridiculous that there is no requirement that they understand the systems in which they're regulating. And for the record, yes, women compete with the tampon. But just having that as kind of a baseline of, I understand how children are formed in the womb. That should have been a standard, but obviously it's not. And we have a bunch of people making decisions about things they have no idea what they're talking about.
Mm. What do you think the biggest challenges that you face in our community, and how do you plan to address them?
So, some of our biggest challenges are having equitable access to affordable health care because we've seen maternal mortality rates skyrocket here in Texas, but not only that, skyrocket for women of color. And having a voice in office who understands one that that is going to be an uphill battle and a struggle, and trying and helping people understand why this is a challenge. Why is it typically communities of color have poor health outcomes? And it's because of, yes, some lifestyle choices, but it's also because we don't always have the access to the healthcare that we need, whether it's not being able to afford getting off work to go to the doctor, or just not being able to afford to see a doctor in general because you've already paid so much for health insurance if you have it, and you rarely have enough left to actually pay for the health care and having all those surprise medical bills. A few people in our community realize that you can actually ask upfront what all of the costs for healthcare are going to be, and they don't usually utilize that resource. But that would be first and foremost expanding our Medicaid, not requirements, but the income levels. So expanding that to move up a little bit higher, just above the poverty line, and also making sure that we cover anybody below that because there are so many people who are stuck in that weird limbo of they make too much money to be able to qualify for Medicaid, but they don't really have enough to have private insurance and they don't have insurance through their employer. And Texas has one of the highest uninsured rates, particularly among children. So making sure we capture everyone who actually qualifies for Medicaid, but expanding that and also make sure that we get all of those kiddos who qualify for CHIP actually enrolled in CHIP. And that also means that we have to revamp and modernize the process by which those applications are processed because a lot of that is actually slowed down and not fully digitized. So we have to increase the amount that that's digitized and kind of get away from the old fashioned paper system where just a few people are having to go through these applications. So modernizing Medicaid, expanding those benefits, including the income requirements, would be kind of top priority for making sure that we have that access to healthcare that we need.
I What will you do to address the transportation infrastructure needs in Bell County, including roads, public transit, and most of all, broadband access?
So we received quite a bit of money from Biden's infrastructure bill, several million. In Temple alone, I believe it was 15 million. And of course, investing in our infrastructure is important, but broadband access became really important and really highlighted during the pandemic because that was the means by which, when we had to flip education on its head overnight and children were at home having to learn at home and needing internet, people realized how important and how crucial it is to have broadband internet access because so many people kind of have always treated it sort of like a just a luxury item. Like it's nice if you have internet at home, but it's fine. You can always go to a Wi-Fi cafe or something like that. But when we had to start educating people at home and now more people are working from home, we realized that in this day and age, in 2024 and moving forward, having the ability to access consistently, smoothly internet at home is so extremely important, whether you're in the city or in the rural areas. We have to invest accordingly, and that would mean increasing the infrastructure necessary to make that happen. So make sure that, yes, we need to take care of roads, but we also need to make it so that more people can work from home. And God forbid if anything happened and we needed to have more children learning at home because maybe schools are closed or whatever happens, that they're able to have that equitable access. And even just on a regular basis, being able to be at home and work on your homework, utilize the internet for research at home has kind of been, again, people treated it like a luxury item, but now children need to be able to access the internet at home. And so making those plans affordable, but making sure that it is consistent out in those rural areas. I grew up in the country, and I remember when internet was kind of, if you can get it, and it's great. And if not, well, you can always go to the library when it's open. But that shouldn't be where we are. It's 2024. It's time for us to do better.
Yeah. What are your plans to expand healthcare access in rural areas and underserved communities in Texas?
So I appreciate the various clinics that I'm seeing open now, the, so-called free clinics. I appreciate that. Um, I would love to see more of those open up in the rural areas, but even if that is not a possibility, increasing transportation, and this is also part of infrastructure, increasing transportation so that we have transportation out to the clinics where you can get that access. I would really like to see more hospitals in rural areas. My mother is still back home in Northeast Texas. And, if she were to call for an ambulance, it would probably be 35 to 40 to even maybe an hour before an ambulance got to her. The hospital that I was born in Kilgore, actually closed down a few years ago. And that used to be the closest hospital, but now it is much further out. And so if she needed, emergency medical attention, it's going to take a very long time for them to get there. And that's the case for many, many people in rural areas. And that's why you see people dying in their homes because they had to wait that long just to get medical attention. So we need to return the rural hospitals back to where they were or build new ones and make sure that we're supporting them financially at a state level because the health and well-being of my fellow Texans matters and it's worth that investment.
Okay. What's your solution do you propose to tackle the rising property taxes in Texas, which are impacting homeowners across the state?
So there are some unique solutions that, I've been kind of working on with some folks who really have studied property taxes. And one of the solutions was kind of to incentivize municipalities to be more responsible about their property tax increases by saying, hey, if you choose not to increase property taxes, because many are doing it when they don't need to. They already have plenty of money in reserve and they could pass on tax savings to residents, but many, especially this past season, have chosen to increase them, which just is increasing their revenue. And they really didn't need to, especially in some cases where the property taxes were increased pretty significantly. So my thought would be to take, that sales tax that we have, 6.25% of that goes to the state, and some municipalities are, taking about the rest of that 2%. But what if we offered them an additional 0.5% or additional 1%, if they chose not to raise some, property taxes just needlessly and be responsible in how they do that. And so fleshing out the details for that is definitely something that we're looking at, but having that incentive in place to not just needlessly raise property tax would be one way to go, but also looking at increasing the state's share of how much we invest in our public schools. Increasing the state share would mean that we don't have to charge as much for school property tax. And so that would be another way to kind of lower that tax burden. And of course, encourage economic development, bringing in corporations who would pay their fair share of taxes so that it lowers everyone else's tax burden.
Okay. What is your position on balancing Texas' role as an energy producer with concerns about climate change?
Climate change is real. I don't know why that's still a conversation that some people are having. It's very real. All you have to do is spend a summer here to realize it is real, or a winter in some cases. When we look at some of the vortexes. We've used the word vortex a lot during the winter, and I think that should be a clue to anybody that climate change is pretty real. But when we talk about balancing that out, I, am all for clean energy, using solar, wind. That is fantastic. However, I am not a fan of expanding solar farms on the ground simply because it takes up a lot of space and that it keeps increasing year after year after year. And one of the issues with that is the land that it's taking could have been used for affordable housing because that's another concern many people have. So the solar farms that where the solar panels are physically taking up land on the ground, I take issue with. I believe that we need to move those to rooftops, businesses, houses. We need to move that off of that land so that we can open it up for affordable housing. But I do believe that if we can be efficient and clean in the way that we increase our energy producing capacity, I would support that. But we do have to be very mindful of the carbon footprint and the impact on climate change.
Okay. Oh, two-part question right here. How will you address the current challenges in Texas public school, such as funding and teacher shortage? And part two of that, what will be the impact of school vouchers in Bell County schools?
So, when we talk about, I've been talking about teacher shortages for years now. And one thing that I need teachers specifically to hear is that we hold all of the power right now. And so many people like the governor and those within his office and his realm have kind of made it sound like we hold no power and we just kind of have to cow down to whomever, you know, they say. But the current classroom teachers and the folks in education hold all the power, and it's time that we harness that in our decision making and what we choose to do. Understand that the teacher shortage starts roughly around high school, 11th and 12th grade, when students are looking at, okay, I'm about to graduate. What do I want to do with my life? And some of them start thinking, many people are thinking about being a teacher from the time they're in elementary school. But remember, they're going K through 12 and they're seeing how their teachers are being treated. They're seeing how their teachers are frustrated, stressed out, and they see how society talks about their teachers. They hear how parents talk about their teachers. So when you think about that and you hear that for 12 years and you get to, your senior year of high school, you're ready to graduate, suddenly you're a little less excited about teaching. And then you start doing the research on, well, how much do teachers make? And how much education is required to be a teacher? And you think, I could make so much more money working at Buc-ee's. I could make so much more money working anywhere else. I don't even really have to get a degree in order to make that much money. And so they start saying, well, I don't think I want to go into college, go through 4 years of college just to come out and not make that much money and be disrespected. So, first and foremost, we have to pay teachers their worth, but we also need to watch the way that we talk about education and stop that blaming public school teachers for everything that's wrong with education because 99% of it isn't our fault and has nothing to do with us. So, looking at it from that perspective, incentivizing education programs, making it possible so that students can go through, get their education degree, get that certification, and get a job that will actually pay them well so that they only have to have one job because we have too many teachers having to work multiple jobs to pay all the bills. So paying teachers their worth is going to help start that chain from high school all the way through college and graduating and making sure that students want to continue that path. And I taught education. I taught the education classes. I sponsored the future educator groups. And I'm here to tell you, we were having those conversations, and that's exactly what students were saying. They saw how teachers were being treated, and they didn't want any part of that. Nobody looks at that and says, "Oh yes, I would love some verbal abuse. I would love to be overworked. I would love to not really have weekends and the whole idea of the summer off is just kind of a phantom thing and people think that it's real, but it's really not." And so, having spoken to so many students over the years, it starts there. We've got to wait to change the way society talks about education and talks about teachers. And we have to get to a point where education is respected, the teacher voice is loud and clear and not being stifled, or in the case of this particular election cycle, being called electioneering. Public schools can't advocate for themselves because it's called electioneering this cycle. Um, and the constant threat of lawsuits from Ken Paxson.
Mm.
So, that's part of it. Addressing it from that level as a society, we've got to change the dialogue, but also from a state level, teachers have to get a raise. We have to at least be at the national average, which will require a $7,000 to $10,000 increase just to touch the national average. So
Hmm.
we have to start with that. But we also have to return autonomy to teachers. And people say, we just want teachers to teach. We don't want them to do anything else. I promise you, we would love to just teach. That would be fantastic if our job was just teaching. But with all of the paperwork that now goes into being an educator, and having and all of the pressure, the societal pressure going into being an educator, just teaching is kind of almost at the bottom of the list of things that we can do in a single day. And so, returning that autonomy and being able to have some more control over that decision making and the decisions for our classrooms and deciding what's best for our students would be at the top.
Yeah.
Dealing with real consequences for student behaviors, because so many instances our hands are tied. And so you have students who have destroyed a classroom being allowed to return to that same classroom, and thinking about the mental health and the impact on that teacher to know that at any moment this child could level and destroy that classroom, and they just have to kind of watch. That is hard. And I've watched numerous teachers have their mental health deteriorated because they never know and they're walking on eggshells constantly. But on the other end, they've got society yelling at them, parents yelling at them, admin telling them, well, you have to do better. This parent is upset, so you have to change your ways. But they're in that classroom having water bottles thrown at them, being assaulted, having desks thrown at them, being insulted, being recorded and put online and being mocked. We're asking a lot from people that we're not paying very much. And also, we have very poor health care. So we're not able to take that time off. I would say that we need more time off for teachers, not just 10 years during the school year, or not 10 years, 10 days during the school year, but additional at least 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
So those are some of my solutions for that teacher shortage, but also remembering that Governor Abbott had a whole task force of people to address that specific question. And they came up with, I believe it's a 73-page document of all the things that need to happen to decrease that teacher shortage and to fully address it. And the only thing that was done was that it was published. No parts of that plan were actually implemented. Nothing was done to address all of the things, the 8 things that they said need to happen. So, how about we go with the plan that we spent all this money to develop? Let's
Yeah.
do that.
Ooh, wow. You said a mouthful right there. I dabble with teaching a little bit, and from what I came up with was well, maybe a teacher, my opinion, 20% of the time we're social workers. We're taking care of their needs, and by the time we're able to teach, class is almost over with. But I'm a firm believer it starts at home. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
we're the teachers not are not there to raise your kids. They're there to teach your kids. And I think that some of the parents got that sort of confused.
They did. They did. And, we don't have the full authority to do everything a parent can do. And what I see happening, especially among some of the extremists, including my opponent, who has been part of the or helped try to reinforce the Readers Act, which some people are calling it the book banning bill. And as some people like to say, oh, well, no books are banned as long as you have Amazon, which is going to bring me to the voucher thing here in just a minute.
Okay.
But, part of what I see with this mentality that Parents want more control of what's happening in schools, and a lot of that came from them having to see more and be more involved, required to be more involved with their child's education during the pandemic when those kids were at home. They had to be more involved, and for some people that was hard, and they did not like that. And so that's when you start to see the increase in disrespect for teachers, because now parents are being asked to do a little bit more and they're frustrated. But with that book banning mentality and some of that movement that we've seen, a lot of the conversation stems around people aren't wanting to have to read the books that are being given to their children or available to their children in schools, which would require, again, more parent involvement. Even when they challenge a book, the requirement is not that they read it, that they can just, say, oh, well, I'm pretty sure it has sexually explicit, content. They can take a guess at why the book is bad. But, you know, part of that means that they're refusing to have a conversation with their child and just explain their values. Most children, when they understand the why behind a decision, will be okay with the decision you've made. If you say, we really don't believe in, premarital sex, it really is, an issue for us. Our faith, kind of keeps us from, going that direction. So I'd rather you not read any books that have that in it. Or if you pick up a book and it has that in it, please, put it away. Have a conversation with your child rather than taking the book off the shelf for everybody else's child. But we're seeing, oh, well, parents shouldn't have to read these books. Parents shouldn't have to have those conversations. Why not? Why wouldn't you want to talk about your values with your child? That makes absolutely no sense. So let's go away from the laziness of, oh, I shouldn't have to even think about it. The school should take care of that. No, that's your baby. That's your baby and your values. My family might be different. So you take care of your baby and your values. But talking about no book is banned unless you have Amazon, I could say the same thing about vouchers. If you really want your child to go to a private school, nobody's keeping you from sending them to the private school as long as you can pay for it. That is your choice. Parents have all of the choices currently that are being proposed with the school choice or education savings account. The voucher is not going to pay entirely for private schools, and private schools, because they are trying to make money, will raise their tuition, most likely in the same amount as a voucher, so that you would still have to pay so much money. But also, no one's asking the private schools to change their acceptance requirements, which means we're talking about using taxpayer dollars to be able to legally discriminate against children. Saying, oh, well, we don't want to have to take children who have behavior problems. We don't want to have to take children with special needs. We don't want to have to take children from an LGBTQIA home because it goes against our values. So you want to send taxpayer dollars to legally discriminate against children. And we somehow think that's okay. Here in Bell County, in the rural areas, and that's one of the big issues with vouchers, is that one, our public transportation system isn't sufficient enough to support children needing to go from their home to whatever private school their parents maybe were able to afford. But also, when we look at it in terms of you're siphoning away public dollars, and we've already had to undergo 2 years now of reduced/no funding, but now you're adding on the strain of money is being diverted to go to private schools. So for a lot, we've already had issues with having to close some campuses because they couldn't afford to stay open. That's only going to increase. But we also don't have the transportation system there to be able to get the children where they need to go. And a lot of parents around here, especially those low income parents, they don't have consistent enough transportation to make sure their child can get to whatever private school. So the voucher program is going to absolutely destroy the school systems here in Bell County. We are not meant to also be funding a whole entire separate school system that doesn't have transparency or accountability the same way that our schools do.
Yeah. I'll piggyback off that, what you just said. This just the private schools. Do you know, are they banning books in private schools or just public schools?
Right now, I believe it is they For a lot of the private schools here, because most of them are Christian, the books wouldn't have been in those schools to begin with. But in the public schools, yeah, they are being removed from the shelf. And I know that my opponent has had conversations about going after the public libraries as well. The genuinely just public libraries here, because those books are still on a shelf and nobody's there to stop a child from picking them up. And so the issue is that, oh, they're still being exposed, but without the consideration, it's a public library. And again, it's a parent's job to watch their child in a public library and to, again, have had the conversation and communicated their values beforehand. It's kind of like when moms go in the store and say, don't ask for nothing, don't pick up nothing, don't touch nothing. It could be the same conversation before you go in the library and just say, here are the books I do not want you touching. Don't go over here. This section is off limits, and watch what your child is picking up. It's all about having to step up just the tiniest bit as a parent and pay attention to what things your child is consuming, what media your child consumes. Be more concerned about that than trying to stop everyone else's child from having access to things.
Yeah, okay. I agree with you on that one. All right. We're coming down to the end, Miss Jennifer Lee, but before we close, can you please tell us how people get a hold of you and how they can contribute to your campaign?
Yes, they can go to my website, Jennifer and the number 4, Texas, spelled out TEXAS.com. They can also visit the Facebook page, Jennifer Lee for HD55. Visit me on Instagram, Jennifer for Texas, and all that spelled out. They can also go to Act Blue and search for Jennifer Lee and make sure it's HD55.
Okay, we appreciate you taking time out on your busy schedule, and we really do. And I'm looking forward to talking to you on November 6th. And congratulations! I'm looking.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Yes. All right. You take care, and thank you for coming on our show today.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for watching Texas in Color. Please tune in every Wednesday at 11 a.m. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification button so you'll be notified each and every time we go on live.